Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Vivian Ottabor, and you're welcome to another episode of Knowledge is Power with Resilient Immigrants. And if you're new here, welcome. Resilient Immigrants is all about empowering, helping immigrants thrive, not just survive. And we do this by providing information, knowledge on just how to succeed, whether in careers, businesses, and life in general. And today we have an exciting topic, which is navigating workplace culture. And we're just going through all of the strategies for success. And I have three experts with me today. And I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves, and we'll go ahead and kick it off. Okay. Evan, you want to go ahead and start?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Evan Kirstein. I am an executive and ADHD coach, and as well as a speaker. And my clients come to me with that nuance, that niche that they need help overcoming their executive functioning, and it is hidden. And so, coming out as ADHD for my clients is something that I'm very aware of, that they don't have an understanding, and we'll get into that, of the culture they're getting into. And so I'm pleased to be here, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. Good. All right. So, um, Murtaza, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Vivian, for having me as well. Good evening, everyone. I'm Murtaza Khwaja. I use he, him pronouns. I serve as Executive Director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta. Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta is the first legal nonprofit organization focused on providing legal and advocacy support for AAPI and MEMSA communities here in Georgia and the Southeast. I am also an attorney and advocate. I was born originally in Lahore, Pakistan, but I've been an Atlanta resident ever since 1992. Excited to be here tonight and to talk with all of you.
Awesome. And we're so happy to have you. All right. And then Leila.
Hi, everyone. My name is Layla Bedad, and I'm here today representing Pollack Peacebuilding Systems. We are a consulting firm focused on building peaceful workplaces, essentially addressing conflict prevention and resolution through mediation, facilitation of dialogue, training, and also conflict coaching. And so a little bit like Evan, my background is I'm Iranian American, and so I immigrated to America in 1990, so around your time, Martaza. And I'm just really excited to be here and apply some conflict resolution, conflict prevention mechanisms to navigating the workplace as an immigrant.
Awesome. And I'm so glad all of you are here with so much expertise, very knowledge. So that's beautiful. Now, I want to start the conversation when you think about where an immigrant starts from, right? Especially those newcomers who, come in their adult ages, and they're well educated. They have all of the experience from their home countries. And of course, they have to find employment here because they have to survive and they have to pay bills and all of that. And they go into the workplace and they see that it's totally different from what they're used to. They're working with people who not don't necessarily look like them or have the same background as them or the same culture, religion, political, everything is different from what they know, right? But in a workspace, you have to work with people. Your work is like your family because you're there 8 hours or even more, right? And they have this difficulties just navigating the environment. So from that groundwork, what are the first things an individual who is in this position needs to think about, or how do they look at situations? And again, we'll go into conflict that happens and how to resolve all of that, but just thinking about the very foundational level of how to even navigate those situations, of the differences in culture and things like that.
Can I jump in and start? Being yourself is probably one of the most important and impactful things, and not trying to push yourself on other people, and being an observer and being quiet. A lot of people have imposter syndrome when they come into a new culture, and they see themselves as saying they don't know me yet, and they have to be themselves. And just knowing that you have enough time there for people to come to you and for you to make the right connections are very important. To know that there is a breadth of time in the beginning of your workspace. You are just sponging up all this material and you don't know how to deal with it yet. And you will find that time and that confidence. And it's important to know that you don't have to be confident yet. Everybody that has seen people come through, your superiors, they know what this is. They know that you are fresh or that you are new to the area and new to the culture, and they can understand that. And so giving them the benefit of the doubt as well, that they will meet you as well.
Sad. I think it's definitely, there's a portion that's incumbent upon the new employee, obviously, and as an immigrant coming to a new space and figuring it out and taking your time and space to learn, and having the mentors and support pieces there. What's also, I think, important is for the employer to take the time to understand the employees that make up their organization, their business. And that goes, it's a two-way street of understanding and being able to work with one another and creating and facilitating a culture that is reflective of, having respect and allowing everyone to sort of exist and survive and thrive in all the ways that we would want them to, whether immigrant or otherwise. So I would just add to that I think, it's a two-way street between both employee and also the employer on doing the work to also understand one another.
I think for me, it's about finding it okay to ask for help or to just clarify something in a question format just to get clear understanding, both for the employer and for the employee. I think for the employee, sometimes we come from cultures that asking for help is shameful. And so I experienced that myself. And so being able to overcome that and really ask for help when you need it or delegate when you need that, I think is one thing that is very important to me, and it has been very helpful to me. And for the employer to really be able to ask questions to clarify or to ensure that the person you're not assuming things about people, and that you're able to use question format to open up safe space for others to kind of say what their problem is, where they're stuck at, and so on, and feel comfortable to ask for help.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing is basically taking the time to really relearn. And it's a two-way street, right? The employee and the employer, and really understanding the people that you work with and being patient to understand the workplace norms. So I think it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of understanding and even willingness to learn. I think that's a part that people miss out, because in most adults, I mean, change is hard. Everybody can agree that change is hard, right? So change is hard, especially for adults, because you're already grounded in your ways, and then you go into a new space that is so different. It's even more difficult. I came to the US when I was definitely in my adult age, and it was very hard for me because I worked at an international organization back in Nigeria. And when I came to the US, I just thought it would be easy because I'd already worked with internationals, I'd worked with foreign, bodies and all of that. But I didn't understand the jokes. I didn't understand the potluck, which is like the food. I was like, what is this? Like, why are we doing this? Like so many things I couldn't relate. And I would seclude myself because I'm like, I don't get it. Like, can someone explain this to me? And even in meetings, people would crack jokes or talk about shows from their childhood. And I'm like, okay, do I just fake a laugh? Like, what do I do? Because I really do not get this. And most people thought I had an attitude, or like I just wasn't friendly. They just didn't understand. Like, you don't take a microphone and just start announcing, like, hey, I'm new in this country. Like, I haven't been here, so I don't know all of these things you're saying, right? So like, again, that was my own challenge and the things that I faced. I know most immigrants probably face the same things, but from you guys' perspective, what are most of the challenges that you see that people face in the workspace when it relates to like different cultures, different backgrounds, political views, things like that, religious backgrounds? What would you say are, like the more common challenges?
I'm going to touch on that because your potluck example resonated with me. I kind of like shiver, or I get like, uncomfortable when it's inclusion and diversity and inclusion becomes about a potluck. And I think, to me, it's about removing barriers to success, first of all, and then investing in the employees' growth and development. And I think those two things are more inclusive in general, no matter if you're an immigrant or new to a state or new to an industry. It doesn't really matter. It applies to everything. And I think a potluck isn't going to do it. I think it's further than that. It is more simple than that, really. And I think it's all about two things for me: removing barriers to success and investing in the growth and development of the individual.
Yeah, I'll add to that too, that I think there's so many differences between workplaces can be incredibly diverse, whether that's racial or nationality based or religiously. Our workplace itself is very diverse. We have people from across all different backgrounds. And I think something that really helps with the culture, one is diversity, equity, inclusion, incredibly important, should not be window dressing. It shouldn't just be something on top. Doing event for Black History or an event for Asian American Heritage Month, that's not, while that can be appreciated, that's not what makes someone feel included. There's policies, structures in place that you put to maintain the dignity of employees and to make them feel like they all are seen and appreciated and feel comfortable. Fully want to support that Layla brought up. The other thing that I'll add to that is, on top of that, having a healthy curiosity and a learning mindset towards each other is good and should be encouraged. There's nothing wrong with asking people to learn from one another. Obviously, there's things that are appropriate and inappropriate in a workplace, but a healthy curiosity should be encouraged, and that allows people to learn more about each other and have a greater understanding. And I think that's something we've seen in our office and also in the communities that we serve.
Thinking about the office workspace, the jokes at home, that come to the office, it's personalized. And not only does America isolate itself with its 50 states and community, we speak in euphemisms, and it's really hard to get past that if you're just very literal. My wife is German, and saying something to her like, "How do you feel about breakfast this morning?" And it comes very literal back saying, "I don't feel anything about my breakfast. What do you mean?" And I said, "Let me restate that. Do you enjoy your breakfast right now?" And that came out to be clearer in understanding that what we say is not what we mean. And, whenever I have somebody that is culturally different, is apologizing to me, because I speak with them a lot. I'm moving to Lisbon in a few months, and we're speaking with a team of people bringing me there, and they apologize for their English. And I say, please don't. English is one of those things that you can chop and mess up in so many different ways, and we understand it. We understand what you're trying to get at, and have more confidence in yourself. And that itself is a great gesture to somebody. And what I believe is we need to personalize on this level. I know that it does need to be policy, and we do need to look out for people that aren't being able to express themselves in their native tongue, that they're not funny in our language, and they are super intelligent in their own, and they're missing that chance because they have to think seconds later than everybody else. And if we personalize it in a different manner, coming from the human first, it becomes a different way of accessing it. So when we are communicating, finding the thing in front of us that we both see and both talk about, instead of calling out a movie line, or explaining how things work, or asking how they worked in your country. That is objectifying somebody to say, "Hey, you're Mrs. Blank from blank." I want to say like Mrs. and then name a country. So like creating that person first, and saying that this is what they like first, and then they are also from this community that does things differently, gives that value to that person first, and then we get to see things with true empathy instead of trying to have empathy. And so I think that the movement to personalize is important.
Okay, and I definitely want to hear more about that. Like, if you could give like um, more clear examples, just that people can take away with. Because I definitely want to learn. I'm sure people, even on both ends, want to learn. Like, okay, how can I relate better with someone who's new or who's struggling with
Mm.
these challenges in the workspace, right? And vice versa as well. Like, okay, how can I receive? And then going back to what Mutisa said, like the curiosity, like having that mindset of wanting to ask questions and learn. I like that. But then I know that there's a very thin line between wanting to assimilate new culture
Mhm.
versus wanting to still hold on to who you truly are, like your own identity, right? I know for a fact that I see some people who they are so immersed in the American culture that it seems as though they've lost who they really are and where they're truly from. And that takes away from you as a person because that's exactly what makes you different. That's what makes you special. That's what makes you who
Mm.
you are. So how do we it's like what is that fine line where you're still able to assimilate, you're still able to learn, but you still hold on and you're still true to who you are?
And that's a hard one because people are masking and they're assimilating when they mask. I believe it is a yes and type thing. They are adding to who they are, except when they face somebody that is their own nationality, they speak in that language, and it's a common language. So there is a mix, and I don't hold a boundary to them. Trying to be like their counterparts, and then trying to be themselves with their family, with their friends, new friends, people that are more like them. I believe it's code switching. Masking is more of a term
Right.
for people with ADHD. Code switching. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that has an effect, and that also gives them imposter syndrome that they're not like this. And wait a second, I don't have like they have a thicker accent at home, or they bring on somebody else's accent when they're abroad. Uh, those two things can happen, and knowing that it is still you inside is important, and knowing that you choose the boundary, and you could choose it
Okay.
anytime,
And then
even if it happened way late in the game. You say, I don't like that anymore. You're allowed to do that.
I think that autonomy
so
is
so
really
Evan, are you
important.
saying that it's okay?
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask. So I don't know if there's a feedback or there's an echo or delay, but I was just gonna piggyback on what Evan said. So is it okay to code switch, or is that not okay?
Mm. I think it's okay because what you're doing is you're relating. If
Okay.
you have a group of friends that only talk about sports, and then you don't, but you don't like sports, that's not code switching. That's trying hard to do something that you're not comfortable with. Code switching with language, like there are ways that people talk to each other, because you want them to understand you. That's important.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, I'll add in just in terms of drawing that boundary. I think it's great for people to have the autonomy to decide what parts of their identity they want to bring to work and what parts they don't. There's no obligation for everyone to have to bring their whole and true self to work. Your work is your livelihood, and as much as you can make that a comfortable place for you, it should be. But you also are not, your workplace is not entitled to every single aspect of you. You can be a father, a mother, a partner, a husband, a wife, a friend, and not all of those aspects have to show up in your workplace. There should be respect for the boundaries that you choose to put. And if you want to bring part of that to your workplace too, obviously there can be space for that. But I do think it's important to uplift that autonomy that any immigrant should have. If they want to be one way versus another, as long as they're making an autonomous decision on what they're trying to share and who they want to be, and they have the space to do that, I think that's something that should be encouraged, regardless of whether that's um, bringing your full and true self to the workplace and being given space to do that, or being like, you know what, I'm going to work to be an attorney or to being a paralegal or to being a doctor. I don't have to bring these other aspects of my life to it because that's not what this environment is for. And I think both should be equally respected.
So I love the diversity because I'm going to try to approach this from a different perspective and see how it lands. But you said one of the things that maybe an employer could use in order to really help this situation really could be small wins. And what I mean by that is, let's face it, the elephant in the room is going to exist. That person is different. They come from a different background. They speak a different language. They have a different religion, and so on and so forth, right? And so that elephant is going to exist. There's not a lot that you can do to combat it. And you're right. The acknowledgement of that is important because that person, can't lose that part of themselves. And so ensuring that that person, the employee, is really able to save face or have small wins in public or in settings in which maybe they're kind of not socializing much, or they're kind of, everybody's curious about them but they really don't know them. And so like saying things like, Layla helped us get to the finish line on this project, like, or whatever it takes in that sense, for them to kind of have little small wins could also internally be helpful for them, because it feels like the burden is so much less when you have those competency-based small wins, that the kind of otherness kind of filters away, and over time people humanize each other, and so it reaches a more comfortable zone. But until we get to the zone of comfortability, I think small wins and saving face is like super important from an employer perspective.
No, that's awesome. All right. So I want to just put a magnifying glass on the work that each of you do. So Evan, I know that you help professionals who struggle with ADHD, right, navigate the workplace more successfully, right?
Mhm.
What would be some of those strategies?
Uh, some of it is that they can't see themselves accurately. Some of the work that I do, I use a Hogan assessment tool, and they have proven that we don't know ourselves. We don't hear the sound of our voice. We don't know what we sound like to other people under stress, when we are in our prime, and we don't know our patterns the way other people really do. And I help people see themselves from the outside in many ways by having them be that other person in role playing. There are times that I teach them body language and being able to be more of a better observer, because if ADHD really shows, they really have a magnifying glass on themselves, because they are so concentrated on trying to do one item at a time that they cannot modulate their voice. Sometimes they have trouble with being upset when they're under pressure, or they need something from somebody and they have a hard time communicating. And the body language can speak miles. So I help them, I give them a book, Teach Yourself Body Language. And it's something that I read when I was interviewing. And I thought, wow, that not only does this tell me what I mean when I'm showing my body, but what other people mean and how it goes across other cultures. Extreme eye contact is respectful for some cultures, it is intimidating for others, and it is disrespectful, like showing disrespect on purpose by not making eye contact. There are variances to this, and finding out what language they're speaking when their toe points towards the door is a big one. So they know when to cut it short, like myself right now.
No, no, no. So I was definitely wanting to even hear more, right? So
Mm.
you definitely are good, but I know very recently I was reading a book. I think it's the 48 Laws of Power, and one of the laws there talks about being able to. It's I don't remember the exact statements, but it's being able to mask what you're thinking,
Mm.
right? Um, I really cannot say how the sentence is phrased, but it talks about the ability to not reveal what you're thinking is a superpower in itself, right? And so would
Mm.
that be one of the ways of, like the body language you speak about?
Oh yeah, because especially with impulsive behavior with ADHD, they don't know the discipline of or temperance to hold back yet because of a failed memory, and they have low memory retention. So they're thinking, if I don't say it now, or, this is going to hurt me if somebody says something against what I want. And they think that somebody is encroaching their boundaries and they have to say something at this moment. When really, there are any moment, and it is even stronger to come back to it in a week and say, last week when we talked about this and you did this. And so I
Right.
recommend that they journal and they see what actually happened and review it immediately. And if it's still bugging you can put it in a place. And then when you come back, everything is settled. And whatever you had a fear of might have quelled itself, or it might have exacerbated. But now you have a chance to act rationally and well thought, actions here. This is going to give you power and leverage that you decided to act on it when you wanted to, not because of the moment that presented itself.
Right. Okay. All right. Awesome. I think that's great. So I want to just go to Murtaza, right? I know that your expertise is around, advocacy and just like legal advocacy in the workplace and discrimination, which is a very big challenge. We see it. Some people are bold enough to even verbalize it. Some people, it's displayed in their actions. I feel like I have felt it many times, and maybe it's been in my mind or just overthinking things. But then, how are you able to tell if someone is actually discriminating against you, or if that person simply just doesn't like you because of who you are or the work that you do? And the last part is some people don't do their job well, and then they lean back on the case of, oh, I'm being discriminated again. No, you're not, you're just not doing your work well, right? So I feel like there's three aspects of it. So I want you to really talk more about that, because I know it's a big challenge that a lot of people face, especially immigrants.
Yeah, it's a big question. So I appreciate that. And it touches upon a few things. So the first thing I want to say is that you probably weren't imagining it. There was probably discrimination that you faced, and that's not okay. And I think generally when people have faced that, they shouldn't feel gaslit or feel like it wasn't discrimination. Now, that's not to say, to your later point, that maybe there were elements of your work that were underperforming or deficient. That could also be the case. And I think that's something that is very common, where there are microaggressions or active aggressions against active discrimination, and also maybe someone is not performing at the level that they need to be. Those two things can coexist. I'm going to put that in the parking lot for a second, and go kind of into what we can tell discrimination is before answering going more into detail there. Their legal bar and definition of discrimination, there's different federal protections that protect against discrimination. It is difficult to prove. It is intentionally done so to protect employers. It's a difficult bar to approve. There needs to be documentation. There needs to be things that you're able to file, whether it's a public employer versus a private employer with a different agency. We have the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission who handles a lot of those cases, or if it's a public agency, then the EEO handles that. And those are additional steps you have to take before you're actually able to file a lawsuit or some element of recourse. I say that because legally, while it may be difficult to prove discrimination, that absolutely does not mean discrimination did not occur. And so the legal side is difficult and requires a lot of documentation, requires probably conversations with counsel during the point that discrimination is going on, so that they can advise you on how to manage certain situations. Documentation is very important. We did a lot of discrimination cases when I was at CARE Georgia. Documentation first and foremost, what your experiences are, making sure you go to human resources and utilize that department, and are also having a written paper trail of everything. Those things are really important. Even with all of that, though, it can be really difficult to prove for a legal reason that there's discrimination, or from a legal standard that there's discrimination. The other aspect that we kind of touched upon is what to do when someone is either deficient in their work or when someone is being discriminated against. Neither of those things cancel out If someone is performing in a deficient way, there should still be standards and procedures in place that they're able to be operated fairly and held accountable for, whether that's being put onto a PIP, whether being given resources for training that anyone else would do, and in a way that's equally applied to anyone. Just because you might be from a protected class doesn't mean you're immune from that. Similarly, just because you are deficient in something does not give your employer an excuse to come down or subjectively or choose when they want to apply certain policies. And that's something we see very often. And that actually does help your discrimination case. So if your employer or your supervisor is saying, hey, we don't like your tone in how you come to meetings, your tone might be at issue. But if they're not saying that to people who are from other either racial demographics or religious backgrounds or any other type of background, that is probably a good sign, and that's something that should be documented for your case, that discrimination is occurring. Doesn't mean that your tone was okay, but it does mean that the response to that is problematic. And so those two things can coexist. And largely in my experience, both as an attorney where I was handling cases of religious discrimination, and also then as an executive director who's managed teams of 40, 50 plus people, those things can happen and generally happen a lot at the same time, where there's microaggressions that help lead to something, and also there might be some deficiencies. In both of those, there need to be solutions that don't cancel out the other. Someone's deficient, they need to be given the training and resources, but they do not need to be come down harder on than anyone else. If someone's being discriminated against, that doesn't if someone's being discriminated against, that doesn't mean that their performance is perfect. It doesn't mean they have to be perfect. They can still be discriminated against, and that needs to be reported to HR, needs to be investigated and go through the correct channels. Those two things shouldn't cancel out one another.
Yeah, and I hear you loud and clear, especially around the fact that it's very hard to prove that discrimination is occurring. And there's a lot of frustration for people who are being discriminated against because they don't have the documentation, right? And then because they don't have ample documentation, they might have some, but it's not sufficient. They end up not necessarily winning the case, or it seems like things are just swept under the rug, or it's like, okay, well, maybe we can find a temporary resolution. But that individual, as you said, it's not in their mind. They actually know what they're feeling. What is the, typical, what would you advise to an individual who's going through that kind of situation, right? And Leila, I'm going to come back to you because this actually spirals into conflict at the workplace, right? Some people who are very, for lack of better words, I want to say maybe just strong spirited, right? They're able to face certain things and be like, this is my livelihood. I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to just try at my possible best to navigate the description of whatever challenges I'm facing. However, some people don't have that willpower or that strength, whether it's emotional or mental, right? So, Murtaza, for you, the question is for individuals who they felt discriminated against and they don't have enough documentation to prove it, they go to HR or whatever the case may be, but nothing happens. Is the advice for them to stay there in that workspace or find employment elsewhere?
So it's always going to depend a little bit about the case, but the broad thing is no one should be in a situation where they feel unsafe, disrespected, or made to feel less than. The first step, even before HR, should always be whoever your direct supervisor is, they should have notice. If that is the person that is also discriminating against you, they also need to be put on notice, but then you go to their supervisor. So it's your supervisor. Should be the first person that's notified saying, I'm about to go to human resources for this, but I wanted to report it to you first. So whenever the first instance of it that needs to be reported comes, it should follow that chain. It should go to the supervisor with just the note that I am going to HR, not that should I or should I not. It's I'm also going to HR to do this, but I'm letting you know too. That way there's a paper trail through email and also through notice for multiple parties and multiple levels there. After that, if you're not seeing progress be made, continuing to raise it is important. Being saying, hey, I'm not seeing the changes made here, putting that in an email, making sure, again, it's through your supervisor. If you have to escalate it to their supervisor to do that, and also to HR. Once through escalation, if it's still in a place where you feel less than unsafe, or that is not where is a healthy space for you, people should and deserve to find places where they can do that. Obviously, that's a livelihood. People don't like to move jobs because they're being discriminated against, and it shouldn't be like that. But people also need to be in places where they're safe. So doesn't mean to excuse the discrimination. You can, at that point, hopefully refer to an attorney first. It's difficult to get employment attorneys sometimes. There are few that do it on either contingency basis or pro bono, but that is what you should do prior to you making any type of notice. Because once you give notice, it doesn't erase what happens, but in terms of the legal standard, it creates a much more difficult environment for you to have a successful claim. So before you actually give notice, I would recommend people, after following the steps of documentation, to consult an attorney, see what their best options are, see if a letter needs to come from an attorney before they handle anything else, before they transition out. But at the end of the day, people do need to have a livelihood where they feel safe, respected, and not made to feel less than.
Absolutely agree with you. Now, before I move on, right, I just want to take it a step, further, even beyond or before employment, right? Because I know, I think sometime last year, there was something going around where recruiters would, in their job posts, they would say no Africans or no Cameroonians or no Ghanaians, right? And this would be publicly posted on LinkedIn or like on the various job boards, right? So you're posting a job and you have qualified candidates applying for that position, but now you're clearly stating you don't want people from a specific country or continent, things like that, right? Is that even allowed?
The postings were saying that not to have what? Sorry, I missed what the postings explicitly said
Yeah.
from
So it's stating things like no Nigerians or no Cameroonians or no Africans, right?
Generally, you cannot explicitly say that. That is illegal. That is prima facie discrimination. So generally, now depending on what it's for, like no is a hard thing to say. There are skills that you need positions that you need certain languages for, and generally that's how they'll include certain candidates, and to exclude others, they'll be like, we need someone who has formalized training in Spanish or formalized training in a particular language. But to explicitly exclude a whole nationality is prima facie discrimination. And in any setting I have seen it is illegal. I have not seen that particular post, but in any setting I've seen that to exclusively exclude someone from any nationality is discrimination. That's illegal.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. All right. So you guys who are listening, if you see that post, what when people see or get posts like that, what do they do? Who do they report it to?
So it would be the EEOC, and it would be, and that those are a little bit easier too, because that is very just prima facie discrimination. Sometimes you'll have a case like that where it's just like, okay, you explicitly said we're not going to hire Nigerians. You cannot say that as an employer. You report that as a candidate. So you have to have standing. So the person who has standing then is an applicant, and so you have to be considered as an applicant for that to have standing. So if it says no Nigerians, you have to be a Nigerian person who's applying for this position and has been turned down for that reason, and it says explicitly there, we're not hiring Nigerians, then that would be reported to the EEOC. Depending on what state you're in, you also have state remedies. Georgia is not one that you have a state remedy in, outside of very, very small potentials, but the remedy in Georgia is going to go to the EEOC. There are other states in the country where you will have state recourse as well, and some of those protections are even stronger than the federal protections.
All right, good to know. Okay, all right. So Leela, we're gonna come to you, and I want you to just talk through workplace conflict and the resolution that you would normally provide. But before even going into the resolutions, like what are the prevalent conflicts that we see in the workplace? How do they come about? The causes of them, things like that.
So I'm going to take the thread of the previous conversation and kind of relate it to what I do. And I hope that answers your question and meets the criteria. For me, I think the first thing is whenever something is not landing well with you, you're feeling uncomfortable or uncertain about something. I think the first thing for me and what we teach at PPS is checking the story in your head and getting to story neutral. So, for example, what that means is, first of all, like this experience that I'm experiencing, this thing that was said, are my biases adding to that? Are my past traumas adding to that? Is my worldview adding to that? Are my blind spots adding to that? And kind of questioning yourself a little bit, because you do want to see if it's just you making the story in your head. And so you want to make sure that you're checking yourself. You want to get the story to neutral, and maybe even ask a direct question. Hey, what did you mean when you said that? And when you're asking those open-ended questions, you're kind of bridging the gap between intent and impact. And so you're checking to see, okay, maybe this time, maybe the next time I see something, I observe someone say something, I observe their nonverbal behavior, I observe all of that. I can ask those questions and kind of ensure that I'm bridging that gap between intent and impact, and really ensuring that my story is neutral. Once I get past that and I'm like, yes, in many instances, I'm now developing a theme. I'm seeing that I have the story neutral and this is just uncomfortable. It's uncertain. Something isn't right. I feel gaslighted. I just feel uncomfortable. Something just doesn't feel right. And so then the next step for me would be able to seek a neutral source. And so a mediator like us, or an ombudsman within an organization that's a third party neutral. Even sometimes HR has played the role of a mediator, and really being able to not only document, as Martez has said, but also bring it to a third party neutral and try to triage the situation, really try to resolve it amicably, and try to maybe take it past the interpersonal and mishap or misconnect, and get to somewhere where you're resolving the issue amicably, because at the end of the day, it is your livelihood. And so once I exhaust that and I'm like, okay, I've got this story neutral, I've exhausted trying to resolve this amicably and save, my livelihood, what do I do? And so that next step is super important. And I've experienced it before. I've actually been fired from a position with a very generous severance because I wasn't a cultural fit. And a simple look at the website of this company would let you know why I wasn't a cultural fit. But we'll save that for later. I think the story there is that this is something that I've done before myself, as out of experience. It is something that we would do as peace builders. The next step that we would take once we've exhausted the other two options is we would not only document things, as Martez has said, request recommendations, ask others, try to find allies so we can get great references from them, kind of set ourselves up for success. But also in terms of documentation, it's really important, because if the employer is basically letting you go with a severance due to not being a cultural fit, you also have the issue of not being able to file for unemployment. And so you got to prove to unemployment that, this is not what happened. And so having those references, having those allies, building that yourself up for success, asking for references, asking for recommendation letters, trying to do that before kind of you part ways is super important to be able to even get unemployment. And the other most important part to that is really networking, starting networking. Networking has been the one factor that I think is important for many people in that situation, including myself when I experienced it. And really being able to network allows you to cut the time that is usually standard of 6 months between employment phases to maybe 6 weeks. Or even 6 days, because you started networking right when you felt uncomfortable, right when you exhausted those two other options. And so that's the kind of level, step by step kind of, or stage by stage process that I would take.
So I know that we are running short. Can you guys hear me just fine? Yes? Okay, I think there's a little bit of delay. Okay, but that's okay. All right. I know we're running towards the end. So and right now the workplace is really tough because there's been layoffs happening. The economy right now is just not what it used to be as of last year. Many people have been laid off. Many people are in fear of losing their jobs. And right now, people are in a situation where they want to brace many things that they shouldn't be bracing, right? Whether it's discrimination or it's conflict that could, shouldn't be happening. People are keeping quiet because they want to hold on to their jobs because there are no jobs out there. The job market is saturated. And so I want to do a round robin asking for advice from each of you, right? On regardless of the situation of the economy or just people wanting to hold on to their livelihood, what is one way each of you, so this is just recommendation from you guys, advice personally, what is one way each of you have advocated for yourselves even when the situation is not very favorable, right, at the workplace? So, and we can start with you, Leila, and we can go around.
Sorry, the question is what to do to make the odds more favorable to you. Is that right?
Oh, it's how have you advocated for yourself? So like
Oh,
what is something that you've done, right? To advocate for yourself even when the situation is not very favorable and you still want to hold on because of reality check. Like, okay, I know that this job is not the greatest. It doesn't necessarily fit me, but I know there's nothing out there, right? I know that it might take me another 6 months to land a job. So I'm going to be here for the time being. But while being here, I still want to have a voice. I still want to advocate for myself, right? So, what are some of those strategies that people can take? But personally speaking, what is something that you have done in a situation like that to just advocate for yourself in a workspace?
yeah, definitely. So I think one of the superpowers that we have as immigrants is being resourceful. And that resourcefulness kind of comes into play at those moments where you need to keep with your livelihood, but you're kind of uncomfortable and you know you deserve better. And so that resourcefulness means, being able to collaborate with other departments, being able to ask for mentorship from someone that you see maybe is approaching work differently than your manager, and really being able to build those connections so you can make that lateral move when it's time, or a position opens up somewhere else in another department. I think wanting to jump ship is too early. And I think rather than jumping ship, you want to use your resourcefulness, that immigrant superpower, and build connections with individuals that you see are promoting the growth and development of individuals like yourself, and being able to collaborate with different departments to show your skill sets that maybe are a little bit different, but are growth opportunity, and holding on to those so that you can kind of put them at play when the right time comes.
No, we're a little short on time, so I'll
Awesome.
be very brief on that. and just uplift that. In advocating for yourself, I think the biggest thing is figuring out what opportunity you're looking for, what resources, whether it's professional development. It's not always a title change. It's not always an organization change. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. And so being really true to yourself, what you're looking for out of your workplace, making sure that that's what you're getting. Maybe you get a higher salary elsewhere, but you don't get the same opportunity to professionally grow. And then in the long run, is that worth it? Sometimes it will be, sometimes it won't be. But those are things you should know before you're in the position. That, hey, this is what's most important to me, my professional development, or the salary is most important to me, or the benefits are most important to me. For a lot of people, it's a combination of all those things. So you have to do a calculus. And then the other is also being okay to say, I'm not happy here. And so I'm going to find some, it is okay for you to make that decision. I'm not happy here. I need to find somewhere else, and to start exploring that. No one, again, should be in a place where they feel unsafe, uncomfortable, or again, feeling like less than.
That's nice. I like
Awesome.
that. I help people by having them be an advocate for themselves before they get to a PIP or after they get to a PIP. And companies hire me after or on the way to someone getting a PIP. And so the main thing that I want to give them is their value back, because they are shamed for some reason, and now they feel that the team is against them. And so I ask them, when they're getting an intuition that something is going wrong, and beforehand, as much as possible, get a formal evaluation and ask questions, because it's about what you can show. If you're proving to them that you are hitting all these marks and that you have, or that the division of responsibility is unclear, but they are getting blamed, then it's important for them to be able to show that and saying that it was not discussed. And this is when that turn to their job, by abdication, and because they were last on, or because they didn't say no, as they didn't know they could have. And having that power of proof is very important to save their work, and to, I know it's going to be a full-time job to save your full-time job. And that's going to be hard, because you also need time, a full-time job of time, to look for another full-time job while you're doing two full-time jobs. And that is a lot of stress for somebody to handle. And it will pay them back when they feel that at least they can stand up for themselves, and there's a channel for them to find, their confidence back, that when they're leaving, it's on their terms, and they did what they could.
Yeah, no, I like that. Okay, so this has been very insightful. It's been very informative. I want to just say thank you to each and every one of you. You guys have brought so much value to the topics, the discussion, and I know to the community as well. And so before you round up, I know we're at 1 minute. I want you guys to just say how people can find you, how people can connect with you, because that's what this is all about, right? People get information from the experts, and if they want to reach out for, maybe private coaching or just to work with you as consultants, how can they connect with you?
I'll jump. You can Google me. Progressive Growth Coaching is the name of my business, but I'm sure I'm not the only Evan Kirstein in the world. I found out by Googling myself, but you'll find me to those.
Our organization, Advancing Justice Atlanta, you can look us up on Google. We're on Instagram. Would love for you all to follow us. I don't do any of the coaching and all myself. It's, the business with the organization's actual programmatic work and all is what I'm overseeing, but would happy to be able to connect, and would love for people to follow the work that the organization gets to do.
Awesome.
So-
Leila?
Yes, so we are Pollock Peacebuilding Systems. You can find us through pollockpeacebuilding.com. And also we have our Peaceful Leaders Academy that you can be a part of, which is a very cool experience and a way to kind of invest in your growth and development. And yeah, we're all on all social media platforms.
Awesome. All right. Again, I want to say thank you to each of you. And to those who are vested in resilient immigrants, those people who are constantly aligned with our mission, our vision, and wanting to give back in any way, shape, or form, we encourage you to definitely reach out, follow us across all social media platforms. We host our KIP sessions on a monthly basis, and it's recorded, it's live and it's recorded. So it's definitely going to be on YouTube, LinkedIn, and the website. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to wrap us off. So thank you guys and have a wonderful evening.